All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Claudia Hewston, and I am the Education and Outreach Assistant for the National Wildlife Federation. Before we get going, I want to share these next few slides with you and just thank everyone who was involved with organizing the Free the Seeds event. This is their 5th annual year, which is super exciting. Their overbranching theme this year is recovery, so just closing the gap in our community food systems. And how we can do that is through seed swap. So bringing those seeds here, being involved, where you can donate at Free the Seeds, Flathead Growers. And then if you want more information on how to do it, if you haven't done it before or you're an expert and just want to learn more about it, these are the people that you need to get in contact with. That's seeds@freetheseedsmontana.com. And yeah, so with that, we're gonna go ahead and get going. So again, my name is Claudia Hewston, and I am the Education and Outreach Assistant for the National Wildlife Federation. I graduated from the University of Providence in Great Falls, Montana, in wildlife biology, and about 2 months into my professional career was like, okay, I want to do something else. So I took kind of a roundabout way. I started my first AmeriCorps term in environmental education, which has led me to my second AmeriCorps term, also in environmental education, but more youth development and community building as well. So I will be in this position until August, so if you have any questions, you can email me until then, and then someone else will answer your emails after that.
And then what?
And then what? It's a continuous cycle, so they've got the Energy Corps, AmeriCorps person there, so always there to help you. All right, so just broadly speaking, so again, National Wildlife Federation, it is the largest nonprofit conservation education and advocacy organization. It was started in 1936 and has just grown since then. Their mission now is uniting all Americans to ensure wildlife can thrive in a constantly changing world. And they do that through helping wildlife and how involving the community and how we can help them. Okay. So again, it's a national organization. Here in Montana, we are located in the Northern Rockies, Prairies, and Pacific region. And this is a huge region. So it includes Alaska, Hawaii, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota. It's a large space. But what's super exciting about that is the headquarters for this region are located in Missoula, Montana. So pretty close, which is very exciting. Within this office, we have 9 full-time staff, and they are, again, it's education, conservation, advocacy, so we have lawyers and biologists and educators. There's a lot of people in that office with lots of different hats. It's been a really cool experience. We also host one of our state affiliates, the Montana Wildlife Federation, in that office. He's a pretty cool guy. You should swing by and say hi. But I do not engage in the advocacy of the law involvement. I am focused in education as an AmeriCorps. That is my capacity. So in this position, I focus. So if you haven't heard of the National Wildlife Federation, you have probably heard of Ranger Rick. They are one and the same. I just wanted to put this up here because initially I was like, oh, grew up on Ranger Rick, hired by NWF. Oh, same thing. So this is a national education tool that we used. I grew up with the 2000-2008 model. My older sister would get these magazines, and my younger sister and I'd have to wait and stand at her door and be like, are you done? We're ready to read it. And it would just be all about wildlife all across the world, very engaging, lots of images, which as a kid, you've never seen some of these things, so your eyes are just huge. However, within my capacity, I focus within these 3 major subsections. So the first is Eco Schools USA. And this is a free online source for teachers K through 12. There is some talk to have pre-K, and they can be adjusted for that age range as well. But what it is there's 12 pathways that schools can participate in. And they can be biodiversity, schoolyard habitat, learning about your watershed, learning about your forest, and teachers and students can participate in these pathways, and they're given a 7-step framework, like go and conduct your audit. So you get all your little kiddos out there with their clipboards and they're looking for habitat and different things. So it's just a really great resource for educators to, it aligns with current standards, so to fit into the current things that they're doing in their classroom and just being environmentally conscious and getting their kids involved. The other one is education and outreach. I do a lot of community building and workshop planning. I'm hoping to expand that into Kalispell, but for now I'm kind of in that Missoula region. Haven't made the connections in Kalispell yet. But that's just like we're doing a beekeeping workshop and a native garden bike tour and things like that. And then the program that brings me here today is our Garden for Wildlife program. Okay, so Garden for Wildlife was founded on the belief that we can all be engaged in this movement, that we can all support wildlife and migratory species and native wildlife. This isn't something that has to be what these other scientific organizations do. We can be involved as well as homeowners, as schools, as businesses and smaller communities. Okay. So this movement, the planting of the seed, began in the early 1970s when 2 U.S. Forest Service faculty came together and they did this large study to see if these larger projects that they were doing in terms of land management, if those theories could also be applied to small backyard spaces. And the theory was if we provide food, water, cover, and a place to raise young, wildlife thrive on these large scales. Is it the same in the small scales? And what they found was, yeah. So transitioning into 1873, we have the Environmental Protection Act that came through and stopped a lot of our species from becoming extinct and helped out a lot of those at-risk species. And it really started to get momentum, and that is when the National Wildlife Federation came out and launched their Garden for Wildlife program, so 1973. Since then, it's gained momentum. Going into the 80s, you had a lot of different things like there's a movement of rebel gardeners afoot, which I thought was a really funny way to phrase that. They're making backyards safe for not only dragonflies, but butterflies, birds, lizards, possums, and other creatures. So we're seeing people that are engaging in this. The media is catching on. People are learning about it. It's escalating into a national fascination. So people were really becoming engaged in their gardens and what they could do for wildlife. So again, this just kind of grows upon itself. So they moved into schoolyard habitat. So going into schools with the Eco Schools program was one of those branches, and working with kids and engaging them in wildlife. And we know that a lot of kids learn differently, and if they're outside, they're going to make different connections than if they're inside. So this was a big movement that they pushed into. They then transitioned into teaching teachers how to teach environmental ed. So now that we have these programs, let's help the teachers be successful within these programs. So we offer different training practices for them, Project WET, Project WILD, just engaging our educators and setting them up for success because they are teaching our future generations. This then moved into getting the hoot, if you all have seen that movie, that was kind of a national wildlife thing, like getting those species out and about into the public, into books, and also into mainstream. They moved into focusing, now that we've got the momentum for gardening, let's make it sustainable. So these people are creating these places, but how do we ensure that it's sustainable, it's resilient, it's going to continue? So moving into those practices and that promotion. This is in 2015. The National Wildlife Federation moves into the Monarchs Pledge, into pushing for pollinators and just really securing that habitat. Baltimore Orioles, so they were the first baseball stadium that became a certified garden space. So you can go and tour their stadium apparently, and it's a certified garden, and I can't wait until I can get NWF to send me there to check it out. I think that would be kind of cool to check out that space. And then most recently in 2018, we've moved into sacred ground, so working with places of worship to bring this environmental aspect into those spaces. Okay, so then we flash to Garden for Wildlife today. It's still kicking. It's been around for 48 years at this point, and it's still based or rooted into the sense that we're creating or increasing the amount of suitable and sustainable habitat for wildlife, and on these smaller scales, because it does add up and make a difference. And it might seem like a lot of effort that we've put into this program, but the reason is because habitat loss is the #1 threat to wildlife today. So with growing populations and agriculture and different things, we're losing a lot of that habitat. So this is a way that we can approach it on a small scale that adds up to something very large. And how we're seeing the loss of habitat is degradation of habitat, so going in, completely destroying it. I think it's parking lot in paradise or something, going through and doing this. Fragmentation of habitat, this is a big one that I don't know if a lot of people are aware of, but you can have like the equivalent amount of habitat, but if it's broken into all these different regions, it's not suitable. So what they find in a lot of different toad species, that someone that's living on this little island is going to be too stressed out, they're not going to reproduce, they're not going to be able to journey into these other habitats, so you're going to see a bottleneck effect, which will decrease genetic diversity. So yes, we have suitable habitat, but is it all connected? And so keeping that in mind. Okay, and then the pollution of our habitat, so how do we keep it clean? So I want to bring us back to this restore topic. That's what we're here today about, restoring, bringing in seeds, filling in that gap, recovery of that. And recovery, as defined by the dictionary, is returning to a state of mind, to a healthy state of mind or physical being, to recover something that was initially lost and just revitalizing it. And that's what we do in the Garden for Wildlife program for wildlife. We're taking this space and we're recovering it for those species. We're planting new things for them to find homes in, to connect, to get food. And it's not just for wildlife. There are studies that show that it affects us as well. So we can help them and help ourselves in a sense, where if we can create this habitat, you're going out, we know it in schools, we can see that depression is reduced if you're in these natural spaces. Your blood pressure will reduce, you'll get a sense of confidence. There's all sorts of studies that prove this. So again, helping them and helping ourselves. So this is a book I've been reading. So Suburbia, if you're interested, it's a pretty good read. It's just talking about the different adaptations that we're seeing in these species as we grow and whether or not they're good or bad. This one says we can reap services and values from nature, such as pollination of important crop plants, beauty, and health. Without it, we will continue to distance ourselves from the natural world and the benefit it provides our enterprise, culture, and well-being. So just really emphasizing that if we can recover some of that natural space and those species, that we will, again, be helping ourselves. So why native plants? The Garden for Wildlife program doesn't explicitly say you have to use native plants. We acknowledge the fact that lavender is a great source for pollination. Bees love it. It's not native, but we are acknowledging that fact. We encourage you to use native plants for a number of reasons, and the #1 being evolution doesn't lie. These plants have been here for hundreds of thousands of years. They're adapted to our climate. They've co-evolved with many of our species. So we see that in our plants every day. With the ponderosa pine, they have their cones that seed every year, but they also have cones that only seed during high exposure to heat. So during those natural fire seasons, they would come through, these seeds would be able to fall and use, and that is an adaptation that they developed over time. The coevolution, so a great example of this, maybe not specifically for Montana, but is the monarchs. So we know butterflies, they'll pollinate flowers. They love it. However, monarchs specifically will only lay eggs on milkweed. So if you want monarchs and you're like, where are all these monarchs? Do you have milkweed? Well, no. That's why, because they have such a strong connection to this native plant that they need it. Montana is not directly in that monarch corridor. We might get a few strays every now and again. A stronger relationship we might have is sage grouse and their connection to the grasslands and how they need those appropriate leks in order to successfully reproduce. And if they don't have that space, they won't be able to reproduce, and we see that decrease in their population. Okay, so gardening with a purpose, it's effective. In doing this, we can, again, you're doing it on a small scale within your space, and you don't have to convert your whole lawn at one point in time. That's a huge project to take on and can be very daunting. You can take this in smaller steps. I know in Missoula, we're a very college town. Most people don't own the houses that they live in. They're living in apartment complexes. They might only have like a patio, but you could create like a gardening box or a window box that just creates that habitat. And the goal with this being that we're going to create these corridors through our cities so we can thrive with wildlife rather than at arm's length. Okay. So the fundamental elements of creating suitable and sustainable habitat. So this was brought about, again, by those U.S. Forest Service in the 1970s when they're like, all right, so we know on a large scale they need food, water, shelter, and a place to raise young to be successful. And they were able to prove that that also applies on a small scale, so in your backyards. So in the Garden for Wildlife program, you guys will see those handouts were given to you. On the back, it has it broken down into each of those subcategories and what we're looking for. So the first is water. So when you're going in, or first is food. When you're going into your space, how are you providing food for wildlife? What do you specifically want to attract into your space? How can you do that? So everything needs food to survive. This is a key one. You have to have things. It really helps if you can get an idea of what type of wildlife you're attracting. It seems like deer will be attracted to everything, so you don't need to worry about them. But if you're trying to bring in like more particular bird species, like I really like black-capped chickadees. They are super, super cute. And if I want to put seeds out for them, I would maybe want to put black oil sunflower seed, but I wouldn't want to put peanuts. Even though they love peanuts, if they're shelled, they can't get into them. It's like, it's too much energy for the amount of energy that they're going to get from that. So they're going to go for some smaller seed. So just being aware of that can help you determine what types of food sources you could be putting out or planting in your space. Another thing to keep in mind is that you need food year-round. Everything does. So in Montana, we have that struggle of we have like a relatively short growing season. So how do we have things into the winter and the fall and blooming throughout the summer rather than this huge bloom in this June and then nothing the rest of the year? So a way that a lot of people overcome that barrier is putting out supplementary feeders. Birds is just an example of this. If you're in bear country, 10 feet, 4 feet, that's the guideline. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about putting out supplementary feeders, and there's a strong argument for both sides. I've read articles that in New England, they're seeing half the population of this bird species is still migrating, and the other half is like, no, we're okay. There's food here for us. So they're wondering if in the future, after evolution takes place, if we're going to have two subspecies of this bird because it's affecting their migratory patterns. If you want to put out bird feeders, put out bird feeders. If you don't, you don't. That's fine. That's up to you guys. There's studies that support both sides. Okay. So again, when you're certifying through the Garden for Wildlife program, you need three different food sources. So something in the summer, something in the winter, could be like snowberries, something in the fall, or if you're doing pollinators, just having like lavender and bee balm and milkweed, if those are what you want, but just three distinct things that you're putting out for wildlife. The next is water. We all need water to survive. This can be done in a lot of different ways and can be very difficult in Montana because we freeze. And And if you don't live on a creek or a lake or something like that, how do you provide those within your space? So an easy one to do is butterfly puddlers. I do this a lot with schools. If you're doing insects or trying to promote bees, it's just like a little, it's this image right here. So you've got like a little plate, you've put some rocks in there, you're putting a little bit of water, they can land, they can take that water in and move on. And in the winter, you could maybe regulate it, pour some like hot water in there, I don't know. With birds, they have all sorts of things you can do. So they actually have heated bird baths, which I think is fantastic. I would love to be a bird in a hot tub all year round. But they also have solar charged bird baths that keep the water moving, or they have de-icers. We sell these on our website and then nationalwildlifefederation.org, or you can go on Amazon and buy these as well. But just making sure that you have some sort of water in your space year round. Okay, these are again some examples of that. We don't really have access to the ocean, so again, National Wildlife Federation. Some people, they're like, what ocean are you talking about? Not here, not here. All right, cover. So this is a really important one. If you can provide food and water, that's great, but if they don't feel safe, they're not gonna move into that space. And this can be anything. So if you came up to my booth, I was talking about mason bee houses. I might have mentioned insect hotels. This is what that can look like. And it doesn't have to be neat. Nature is not neat. Like, this could be anything. Brush piles. I read an article that said, throw your Christmas tree into the yard for X number of months and create a microhabitat. And that's being effective. And then you can have a bonfire in the spring when you're done with it. But you're just creating that habitat for them year round so that they feel safe to move into those areas. They can get away from predators. So again, it doesn't have to be like a very specific thing. If you are trying to bring black-capped chickadees into your space, bushes. I don't know how many of you have walked past a bush in the city and it just like is like moving, it's alive. That's because they're taking cover within that. Okay. Roosting boxes, if you're trying to bring in bats to help with insects. We have a compost facility in Missoula that just put up a bat because they compost. There's a lot of insects there, a lot of flies and different things. So they are like, well, let's try and address this issue and create bat habitat so that they'll come and eat our insects. So very holistic approach to that. Okay, so the fourth one is a place to raise young. And this very often overlaps with that cover because if they feel safe, they have food, they have water, they're gonna start living and thriving there. Yeah, I thought these woodpeckers were pretty dang cute. And again, a lot of this is going to overlap with your cover. I do want to say that, again, we're bringing up the monarch example, or even like amphibians. I'm a sucker for frogs. I think they're fantastic. I did all my undergrad research on them. I think we should save the tadpoles because I don't know. That's me. But if I wanted to create frogs and bring them into my space, I need to remember what they look like in their beginning life stages. So this all like, I want frogs and I don't have any. Well, do you have some sort of like water looking thing or mud, or is it the proper temperature? Like, are you creating that habitat for them to move in and have young there and then grow up and be adorable, cute baby frogs? They wouldn't be babies at that point. But just keeping that in mind, that they have different life stages and they need different things within all of those life stages. So if you want to support it, having all of those opportunities for them. So again, this is example. You'll notice that a lot of these overlap with your cover resources if you're going through the Garden for Wildlife application. And then this is not something that was found in that original 1970s research. They said food, water, shelter, and a place to raise young. That's what you need. So over time, we've developed that sustainability. So how can you make your garden space more sustainable? And this can be done in a number of ways. You can look at compost. That's a really easy one. If you don't want compost because you live in an apartment like me and you only have so much freezer space and you don't want it stinking up your apartment because your hamster already does that for you, what else could you do? And this could be rain barrels, so putting rain barrels out and capturing some of that water. I know that some people, you can adjust your lawn mowing practices. By letting it grow just a little bit longer, you're increasing the amount of time that insects have that habitat and not mowing it as often. That's a practice as well. So within this program, it gets a little tricky. We have like these 3 subcategories, and you need to have one in at least 2 of these. I know it's like a lot of numbers, and sometimes confuses me, but if I was doing this in my house, I would maybe use mulch instead of Kentucky grass, and I would put out rain barrels. Done. I've completed my 2 elements of sustainability that I'm required to have with the Garden for Wildlife program. However, if you want to have more, that's fantastic, and I will not discourage you to do that. Okay? So in summary, you're looking at 3 food sources: 1 water, 2 cover, 2 places to raise young. Again, those might overlap. And then sustainable gardening, 2 from the 3 subgroups that we have. And again, I want to emphasize this. I went to a native garden talk the other day in Missoula with Marilyn Marler from the University of Montana. She's a super awesome resource. But you don't have to do this all at once. A lot of people are like, I can't tear up my whole backyard and do this. You're like, okay, well, just tear up like a corner of it. Like, you can do that. And another thing I want to emphasize with this is at no point will I come to your house and be like, do you have all of these? I do not have the capacity to do that. Again, our region includes Alaska and Hawaii, and as much as I would love for them to fly me out there and assess, like, if they have all these things, that'd be a fantastic vacation. I can't do that. So this is very honors code, what you are going out. If you want to email or call or go online and just get information and like talk to someone, maybe I can connect you to someone within your region. So like in Kalispell, I don't have the capacity to maybe give you the best resources. I could tell you what you could plant and when you could plant it in Missoula, but very different regions, okay? But I have a contact at the Montana Wildlife Federation that they do have a person here in Kalispell, or they might, somewhere closer, but I could connect you with them and they could give you their best advice. So using us as a resource, because we can't come out and check it for you, but we can help guide you and connect you to those resources. Okay, and again, I think a lot of times if people are like, well, if I convert it to wildlife habitat, I'm gonna lose all my lawn space, and like my kids aren't gonna be able to go and play in the yard, and my dog isn't gonna be able to run, and I can't lose my lawn. You can still have all those things and improve or increase the amount of suitable and sustainable habitat for wildlife. This was a super easy way to kind of show that to you. Just showing, like, and with kids, a lot of times, when you go to a park, it seems like they always go off into the woods somewhere where they're not supposed to be anyways. So this just, like, it increases that exploratory, getting in nature, tactile, touching, feeling, smelling, and different things like that. And then they can go to school and play in a yard or go to the soccer fields. There are other places where you can get that exposure to lawn and still at your home kind of balance it out. And again, it doesn't have to be a lawn. It could be a window box. It doesn't have to be this huge project. I know I live in a basement. I don't have access to like that, but at my office, I have like this little space that I could put something out. Okay. And then the benefits of the Garden for Wildlife program. So once you've gone through this step, you've connected with us or not, and you've certified on your own, you are entering a community that is dedicated to increasing this habitat, to creating those corridors, to thriving with wildlife rather than at arm's length. You get 10% off the National Wildlife Federation website. You get a personalized certificate that we will mail to you. You can get signs to put up. I know I was in Helena this week. That was this week. I was in Helena and we were doing a food drive, collecting food for their backpacks to school program. And someone has a sign in their yard because they are so proud of the work they've done for it. And one of the gals I was with, she's like, "What is that?" And I was like, "Let me tell you." I know all about this. So you're connecting with each other and just kind of being an example to others of like, it doesn't have to be this huge project. Like it can be something very small and you can still live there and share that space with them. You're not sacrificing it. And then you receive the National Wildlife Federation magazine, which I've got some calendars downstairs if you want to see what some of the photos look like. It's just incredible. Okay, so growing from our Garden for Wildlife program, we go into the community wildlife habitat. And so what this was is that enough people thought that this was important, and they started going through and certifying their spaces and taking these steps to the point where they're like, we want to do this on a larger scale. This is important not just to us as homeowners and families, but as a community. So this program started in 1997, and it was just connecting all those people, again, in that larger network to kind of build their impact. So what this is you earn certification points through how many people you can get to certify. This includes schools, public spaces, houses, everywhere you can think of. We got city and parks on board, and they changed their lawn mowing practices. It's a large effort. And then you also have to earn points through education and outreach. So hosting workshops about soil quality and different things like that, in order to like just get your word out there and involve as much as the community as you can. And I mean as much of the community as you can. So these are homeowners. We've got the Missoula mayor there. We've got the county office in this picture. This is a Ranger Rick at a parklet. So Missoula does this thing where they turn parking spaces downtown into just a park. And they talk with people and engage them in what's happening and how they can get involved. You'll see some of these education outreach opportunities down at the bottom, just engaging kids at different events. That was our education points. A cool thing that I want to point out is they went through and they started certifying the traffic circles in Missoula, which are kind of a weird thing that they're there anyways, but the traffic circles, they're going in and they're being very intentional about what they're planting there because they don't want a bunch of bunnies trying to cross the road to get to this, but they're creating bird habitat and insect pollinator habitat because those are kind of those small spots that they can jump from piece to piece to piece. And again, creating those corridors. So that was something cool that they've done. And you'll see by this map, so the National Wildlife Federation is located in Missoula, and Missoula was the first certified wildlife habitat in the state of Montana. This was a huge accomplishment. We are super excited to do it. We are currently helping the Montana Wildlife Federation group in Billings to help certify Billings, and they are so close. And it's super exciting to see that movement happening there. Yeah, so, and this is something that I want to bring. It doesn't have to be your city. Like, you don't have to say like, Kalispell, we're gonna do this and we're all gonna get on board. You could go to your homeowners association or just your neighborhood and be like, hey, let's create a community wildlife habitat. So you'll see Washington, there's like 18 of them all within like the Seattle area. And those are just a bunch of people coming together at this commonality. I think one group hosts a native garden bike tour through their community each year. And that's their education and outreach. That's how they continue to renew that certification. So yeah, it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to get the whole city on board right now. Fortunately in Missoula, we were able to do that. And that's mainly because they had a full-time AmeriCorps member that was able to kind of push a lot of this stuff. There was a lot of backing from NWF. They got the mayor on board right away, who was super gung-ho about it. And as much as I would love Kalispell to do that same thing, you know, it's a matter of who's there at the right time and how you can connect with one another on this common ground. Okay, so I want to thank you all for coming. I really appreciate your time and being here. I wanted to leave this open now for specific questions about your spaces and how you can start to convert your area if that's something you're interested in, or if you're at a school, how you could start this. So,
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, I work for a company that owns a lot of the hotels around Glacier National Park.
Awesome.
And, I mean, we do a lot of these things, you know, with wildflowers and all those sort of things, like Glacier Park Lodge, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously getting a company to do something at a larger scale, where would you even begin? Because you need volunteers, because our staff is already kind of strapped and the workforce is kind of limited, so
Mm-hmm.
we bring a lot of people from the outside coming in. But if we were to develop like volunteer programs, or like how would you go about like doing something at multiple places?
So how to develop that volunteer system?
Like within the company, or like do you have other people that come in and coach? Like how could you even?
So with like the Washington one, which I think is maybe going to be the best example, they had individual members that were coming in and kind of making that movement happen. Because you're in Montana, I would love to help you kind of network and find that group. A group off the top of my head is reach out to your local 4-H'ers. They have a garden program within 4-H that they have to complete X number of projects each year in order to move on to the next year. And so that would be a great saying like, hey, we have this project, we don't have the capacity. Would you be interested in having one of your gardener people bring your 4-H'ers out here and help us do this work? And they could then use that as their kind of project to do their requirements. Another one would be like Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. Again, they have to earn certain badges, and I think one of them is like habitat related. So maybe getting those troops to come out, and that way, again, you're increasing your reach, not just within your organization, but into the community. You're involving the youth to come into this space, say, we have the space, we don't have the time, would you be willing to help us with that? And more often than not, they'll be like, so I was in 4-H for 12 years, and they're like, head, heart, hands, health, like, let's get stuff done. AmeriCorps is also that way. MCC might be able to help you out with that. I know they have crews that go all over the place, and they have like the tools and the manpower.
What's MCC?
So Montana Conservation Corps, and you might want to go back out to the booths because I know she's out there right now, but they have adult crews, they have high school crews, and they even have middle school crews now. And so they have those kids for like 2 to 4 weeks at a time. So if you said, hey, we have this very specific project that relates to habitat and increasing it, would you be able to come out with us? And they'll take that crew out, they'll camp. I think she said the middle schoolers camp at Abgar, and so maybe they're already there. It'd just be a matter of connecting with them. I hope that kind of.
Local resources, the Flathead Conservation District, and they have a table downstairs. Just as far as like maybe helping to coordinate some of these groups, if you guys don't have somebody with the hotel.
Yeah.
You know, they have a lot of knowledge as far as local species and things like that.
Awesome.
Yeah, and they're definitely established, so
Yeah.
Cool. I saw another hand earlier, I don't remember who had it up. Are there other questions on like how to implement this?
Of the things that that create habitat,
Mm-hmm.
what do you do first?
What would you do first? Probably water. Honestly, that's going to be your most critical. So again, I would do that water and food source because that's bringing them into your space now, and they're going to recognize that as a place where they can get those resources. And then as you kind of have those communities coming back, then you can create that like continuous habitat for them. So moving into the insect hotels or planting something shrubbier. If you're like doing birds, red oyster dogwood is a really great one because it's so shrubby and like it has a really thick foliage in the summer, and that's something for them to hide into. So once you get that food source and that water source, maybe implementing some of those for them to come into that space.
Okay, and then I've seen a lot of the big plastic water collection containers.
Mhm.
Is there anything, like, do you use a wine barrel or something that's not, I mean, the plastic.
So I don't know about the wine barrel. In terms of, my worry would be that it would somehow like not hold, like over time it would like leach out. If you're worried about the plastic, I understand that. But I know there are programs, the River Network has a program that does, they take syrup drums from Coca-Cola and they repurpose them. So in that sense, you're not going out and buying this very specific, but within those programs, they're like, hey, these are these syrup drums that Coca-Cola has, or that would be something. And that's the River Network has a grant that they do, and they encourage people to apply for these grants and then host workshops, and they'll send you, I think this year it was limited to like 20 drums. That's 20 reusable drums that you're getting out into your community and conserving water with. And maybe there would be something here local in Kalispell. I'd have to do a little more research in terms of like a business that might have that stuff laying around. But yeah, so still plastic, but reusing, upcycling type of.
Maybe set them inside of the
wine barrel.
Yeah, there you go.
So at least you're not looking at the
aesthetically,
aesthetically,
it needs to be pleasing.
Yeah,
It's nice
yeah.
and
Some antique, like, you know, copper, like drum or something like that. You can find cool stuff, I bet.
Yeah. Hunting around.
Yeah.
Go still kegs. It's effective.
Very durable.
All right. Yeah.
How many homes would you need for a community wildlife area? So we live in a very,
So it's based on population. So if you say my homeowners association has 50 people in it, because you go onto the community wildlife habitat, you make a website page, it connects you with us. So once you say like we have 50 people, it will be like, okay, with those 50 people, you need to get 10 certification points and 15 education points. And how you do that is like certifying a house is like 3 points, or certifying a school is 5 points. So it does keep that in mind. Like you would not be expected to do what Missoula does every year to get that certification. It is adjusted to how many people you have in that space. Yeah.
So I guess to get to that place on the website for creating more of like a homeowners group to do this kind of stuff, how do I access that?
So, so it's not in here. So, because it's like the Garden for Wildlife and then the Community Wildlife Habitats, like this other branching thing. So my perspective is a little different because I am the administrator for the Missoula area, so I'm not sure what you would see coming in as a new community. My first thing would be search Community Wildlife Habitat.
Okay.
And it's going to link you to a National Wildlife Federation page, and it'll show you how to like set it up and sign up for your organization. Let me give you my email though before you go, and then I can research that and send it to you, like a direct link or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love the picture of turn this into this.
Yeah.
Is there a place where you can see more examples of that? Like, I think that was like a pretty visual. You had the just lawn, it started to dig it up, and then you had this.
So
Pinterest.
I got that off of Pinterest. I'm not gonna lie to you.
What did you put in?
I just typed in like creating wildlife habitat.
Okay.
And it gave me kind of like, a lot of people will do those before and after photos. If you're interested, I can maybe connect you to someone. Marilyn Marler has, again, university. She's like in charge of everything they do on campus and has converted her house yard into like this beautiful wildlife garden, and she actually does tours of it. And I know that she has photos kind of along their way, so I could even ask specific. Marilyn Marler. Yep, she's a great resource at the University of Montana. Yep, she's in Missoula. Yeah, she would be a great contact. I know, like I said, they do. If you want to come up to Missoula, June 6th from 9:30 to noon, we're having a native garden bike tour. And so what that'll do is it'll start at the University Ethnobotany Garden, and then we'll bike through a couple of communities and show you like specific homeowners that have been doing this project. And then Marilyn Marler is one of those people. We'll be stopping there. And then we'll also be going to like an 8th Street Pocket Park that's been converted. Soil Cycle is going to talk about some sustainability. And then we'll end at the Montana Natural History Center, and we'll have a local native gardener nursery representative there. So it's not within your region, but that might be something cool if you have the capacity to come up and do. I would love to try and organize something like that in Kalispell, and I'm just slowly trying to figure out how.
What was the date of that?
June 6th.
Do you sign up for that?
So I'm going to be creating a Facebook event for it, so you could go in there and say that you're interested. The idea behind it is that whoever shows up, I will lead through this tour. We're going to have pamphlets and different things. So if you want to go on Facebook, it's Missoula Community Wildlife Habitat. And that's our Facebook page. So that'll have all of our events that we're doing to renew our certification in Missoula. You can contact me through that page as well. And I'll be putting a Facebook announcement up for that event now that I've gotten like all those people to commit to it. So, yeah.
So you gave a quote from a book. What was the book title again?
Suburdia. Suburdia. So like, yeah, I have personally made it a goal to read more this year. And that was one that I picked up just at the Montana Natural History Center. They were selling it there, and I grabbed it, and it's a really great read so far, and it's talking about those relationships that we have with those species and the adaptations that we're seeing in those species, and whether or not they're good or bad. Because a lot of times I feel like we can get bogged down with like, this is awful and terrible, but this book does a really good job at highlighting some of the benefits and, you know, happier things that we are seeing through that, alongside maybe some of those negative effects as well. So it's a good read. All right.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.